Red Willow Ford, 1887. Elena Marquez's head slammed against the cold riverbank as a drunken ranch heir pinned her in the mud, his fingers digging into her bruised skin like he meant to erase her name from the world. She clawed at the wet earth, lungs burning, dress torn, the river tugging at her boots as if it wanted to finish what he'd started. In the dark, between his laughter and the roar of the current, one thought hammered through her terror. If I vanish here, no one will even ask where I went. Hoofbeats thundered through the reeds, a shadowed rider breaking from the night. But she didn't know whether he was salvation or just another man come to claim what was left of her. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The river had nearly taken her, and what the river didn't take. The man with whiskey on his breath tried to claim for himself. By the time Isaiah Cole carried Elena up the narrow path toward the outer cabin of Black River Ranch, she was half frozen, clothes torn at the shoulder, mud streaked along her shins, like old bruises waking back to life. Her breath came thin, quick, the kind a scared animal makes when it isn't sure if the hands holding it mean help or harm. Isaiah didn't speak at first. His arms were steady, if tired, and she felt every shift of muscle as he climbed the last rise. She tried once to push away, weakly, but he kept a respectful hold, firm enough to keep her from falling, loose enough to tell her she still had a choice. He set her down gently on the cabin step. The cold wood bit through her dress, and a shiver rose up her spine. Another followed, one she tried to hide by pulling her elbows in tight. Isaiah noticed, but he didn't crowd her. He stepped inside, returned with an old wool blanket carrying the faint smell of cedar smoke. "Cover yourself," he said quietly. His voice held weight, deep, worn, shaped by seasons of wind and dirt. Not the voice of a man claiming ownership, but of someone who'd seen too many storms take more than they should. Elena pulled the blanket around herself, fingers trembling as she tried to knot the corners. Her knuckles were scraped raw. Thin lines of dried blood crossed her wrists. When she lifted the bowl of stew he handed her, the spoon clinked against the tin from how hard she shook. She ate anyway, slow, careful, as if any sudden move might break whatever fragile safety had settled over this step. Isaiah crouched a few feet away, forearms resting on his knees, hat brim shadowing half his face. He watched the ground more than her, giving her room to breathe. "I'm Isaiah," he said at last. "Isaiah Cole. My sister passed 2 winters back. Left me her boy to raise. Jonah's his name." Elena nodded but kept her eyes low. She didn't want to meet the gaze of any man. Not tonight. Not after Levi Kane's slurred threats, the grip on her waist, the sick heat of whiskey breath on her cheek. Her stomach twisted. She steadied the bowl until the feeling passed. Isaiah rubbed a thumb over an old scar, voice low. "My sister asked something of me. Last thing she ever said." Elena froze, just slightly. "She told me not to let a woman stand alone against wolves. Not ever again." His voice cracked the faintest bit. Not much, just enough to show there was a grave behind those words, dug by regret and a promise made too late. Inside the cabin, a floorboard creaked. A small shadow hovered at the doorway. Jonah, skinny as a reed, hair sticking up from sleep. He peered at Elena with wide, gentle eyes. No judgment. Just curiosity and a child's soft sympathy. "Back inside, Jonah," Isaiah murmured. The boy stepped away, still looking at her until the door swung shut. Elena swallowed hard. The stew in her mouth felt too thick to go down. "You don't have to stay," Isaiah said softly. "Not unless you choose to. But you're not fit to walk tonight. And no one's taken you from this step unless you want to go." She flinched. That word, taken, cut through her like a jagged edge. Her fingers dug into the blanket. "I don't want trouble," she whispered, voice thin as thread. "You didn't bring trouble," Isaiah answered. "Trouble came looking for you. That ain't the same." Silence settled, cautious, not heavy. Elena shifted, wincing at a deep bruise beneath her ribs. She pulled the blanket tighter. For the first time since the riverbank, she wasn't bracing for another hand to drag her back into darkness. The cabin step wasn't warm. It wasn't home. But it was steadier than anywhere she'd stood in a long while. Isaiah rose slowly, joints cracking, and nodded toward the door. "You're safe here. Take the night. Rest your bones." He didn't add, "I'll guard the door." He didn't need to. He simply stepped into the porch shadows, pulling his coat tighter, settling in like a man who would keep watch as long as breath stayed in him. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then finally, with a trembling sigh, she let herself lean against the cabin wall. Just for tonight. Just long enough to stop shaking. The sun had barely climbed past the first ridge when Elena stepped out of the cabin, the borrowed blanket folded neatly in her arms. Her dress was dry now, but stiff with river mud. Each movement tugged at a bruise. Each breath reminded her of fingers that had no right to be there. Isaiah stood beside the corral, fixing a strap on his bay gelding. He didn't look surprised to see her ready to leave, only quietly resigned, like a man who'd expected a wound to reopen. "You ain't fit for a long walk," he said without turning. "I have work." Her voice was steadier today, but still carried the thin edge of a woman not sure the world would let her speak. Isaiah tied off the strap, took up the reins, and started walking. "Then I'll walk with you." "I don't need—" He stopped. Just one step. Looked at her over his shoulder. "I know." He didn't push, didn't demand. Just waited, for her to decide whether she wanted to follow the trail alone. Her ribs still ached. The memory of Levi's hands still crawled beneath her skin. After a breath, she walked after him. They went on foot, Isaiah leading the horse, keeping pace with her shorter steps. He didn't stride ahead or fall behind, just walked, quiet, steady, a presence that didn't crowd her, but didn't leave her exposed either. The air near town thickened long before they reached the first building. Elena felt it before she heard it. Eyes pulling at her dress, at her hair, at the faint swelling on her cheek. A man leaning against a post whistled low. "River trash crawlin' in early." Another muttered, "Black rancher picking up strays again." Elena stiffened, legs faltering for half a heartbeat. Isaiah didn't touch her. He never touched without need, but he shifted a fraction closer, enough to tell the street she wasn't alone. They reached the wash yard where women beat clothes against boards. The chatter dimmed, eyes narrowed. One woman sniffed pointedly. "Didn't expect you back," she said, wringing a shirt so hard her knuckles went white. "I work," Elena replied. "Same as always." The woman's gaze slid over Elena's torn hem, the bruise darkening her collarbone. "Sure looks like you've been busy." Heat crawled up Elena's throat, not shame, anger. But anger today was fragile, thin as a cracked blade. She swallowed it and knelt beside the tubs, hands trembling as they touched the cold water. She didn't see Sheriff Harlan until his shadow fell over her. "That you're doing?" he asked Isaiah, jerking his head toward Elena. His tone wasn't sharp, but held the oily softness of a man who bends whichever way the wind, and the money, blows. Isaiah's jaw ticked once. "She was attacked." The sheriff sighed, scratching his jaw like irritation was an inconvenience forced upon him. "Folks talk, Isaiah. Wasn't wise bringing her out here. Ain't wise keeping her on your land, neither." "That's so?" Isaiah asked. "You know how this town runs. Folks don't like entanglements, especially not between a Mexican girl and a black rancher." His voice dropped lower. "And with the Canes, you're poking a nest that's already angry." Elena washed the same cloth 3 times, water rippling with each tremor of her hands. She knew what he meant. She'd lived under men like Silas Kane all her life, men who owned land and law and sometimes people. Isaiah stepped closer to the sheriff, shoulders broad, shadow long. "If I see the man who hurt her, I'll deal with him." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Harlan muttered. "Listen, leave her at the mission house. Let Miss Carter handle her. Best for everyone." Isaiah didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "She works for me." The street fell quiet, shock freezing half the faces around them. A rancher's eyes widened. A woman's jaw stiffened in disgust. The sheriff exhaled sharply. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Isaiah turned from him, walked straight to Elena, and kneeled, bringing his eyes nearly level with hers. The street held its breath. "You got a cabin on my land," he said, gentle but loud enough for every gossiping mouth to hear. "You earn your keep honest. Any man, any woman call you a thing, they can bring that to me." Elena froze. Water dripped from her fingers, cold enough to sting. No one had ever spoken for her in public. Not like this. Not without asking something back. "I'll only stay a week," she whispered. "Enough to save for the road." Isaiah held her gaze for a long moment. Something old and weary flickered in his eyes, something that knew promises too well. You stay as long as you're safe. Not as long as I want you there. Not as long as you need me. Just safe. And for the first time in years, that word didn't feel like a lie. For the next few days, the ranch settled into a kind of quiet rhythm, one so thin and delicate it felt like a single hard breath could snap it in two. Elena rose before dawn, always the first to touch the cold. Her ribs still ached from Levi's grip, and sometimes when she bent over the bucket, pain shivered under her skin like a hidden ember. But she worked anyway. Work made sense. Work didn't lie. Soapsuds didn't judge a woman the way people did. Jonah followed her like a shadow, small, curious, barefoot more often than not. He carried water in a tin pail almost too big for his arms, sloshing half of it on the trail. When the cold hit his toes, he hissed through his teeth and pretended he wasn't shivering. Elena saw right through him. "You don't have to help," she said one morning. "I know." He grinned, a missing tooth right in the front. "But you don't tell stories unless you're working." She blinked. "Stories? 'Bout your papa, 'bout the river, 'bout the songs he taught you." She hadn't realized she'd said that much. The words had slipped out in scraps, small memories carried on the rhythm of scrubbing. She'd talked about her father's boots kicking dust on the river trail, the way he'd whistle low before sundown, the way he'd press a flat river stone in her palm and say, "This land remembers who we are." She hadn't meant to share it, but grief has a way of leaking, quiet and uncontrolled. Jonah soaked it in like a thirsty plant. By midday, Elena would hang the clothes on the line behind the cabin. The wind wasn't always kind. It snapped dresses sideways and tangled sleeves like fighting birds. Her hands reddened from cold water and hard lye, but the ache felt honest. Something she earned, rather than something forced on her. Isaiah worked nearby, mending fences, tightening broken boards, checking horseshoes. He didn't hover, but he stayed within shouting distance, as if some part of him refused to let the world sneak up on her again. Sometimes their eyes met across the yard. Not long, not intimate. Just steady. Like two people standing on opposite banks of the same river, trying to decide if the water between them was crossable. That evening, Jonah asked Elena to read to him. She hesitated, not wanting to enter the main house, but the boy's eagerness softened the knot in her chest. They sat on the small porch, drawing letters in the dirt with a stick. Her father had taught her the same way, slow, patient strokes. Behind them, Isaiah repaired a saddle strap, glancing up now and then. He didn't interrupt, but Elena felt the warmth of being observed without being possessed. It was strange, almost unbearable. Later they shared a simple supper. Beans again, a bit of dried pork, cornbread Jonah had burnt on one side. The table was small, the lantern dim, the cabin drafty. Yet something about the three of them sitting there made the night feel less sharp. Elena ate slowly, careful with each bite. Her body still didn't trust peace. peace had never stayed before. "Everything all right?" Isaiah asked. Quiet, no pressure behind it. She nodded. "Just tired." He accepted that without prying. A rare kindness in a world full of men who thought a woman's pain belonged to them. After supper, Jonah ran outside to chase fireflies. His laughter floated through the cracked window, thin, high, wild in the way only a child untouched by cruelty can sound. Elena watched him, unable to stop the soft tug behind her ribs, a feeling that resembled longing, or maybe remembering. Isaiah leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. He hasn't laughed like that in a long time. Elena didn't answer, didn't know how to. The silence between them wasn't hostile, just heavy with questions neither of them was ready to ask. "You don't owe us anything," Isaiah said. The words startled her. She looked up sharply, expecting judgment, expecting the same tone men used when they wanted gratitude packaged in obedience. But his expression held nothing of the sort. "You work," he continued. "You earn your keep. That's enough." Her throat tightened. She forced her gaze down. "I pay for what I take," she whispered. "I know." He shifted, scraping a boot across the floor. "Sometimes folks can still accept a thing without owning the person it came from." She swallowed hard. Because that was the part she didn't know how to believe. Night fell slow. The wind carried the smell of sage and old dust. Elena returned to her small cabin, lying stiff on the narrow bed. The frame creaked when she turned. Her bones still hurt from the riverbank. Her skin still carried the ghost of unwanted hands. But the blankets were clean. The door shut with a latch that clicked true. No footsteps followed. No shadows lingered in the corner waiting to claim her. For the first time in a long time, fear didn't own all the space inside her. The quiet was fragile, but it was hers. Just for now. Just until the world remembered her again. The river always called to her. Quiet, steady, patient. Not like the night Levi tried to drag her beneath its bank. No. This part of the river whispered differently. Older. Kinder. As if it remembered things long before men tried to own its edges. On the fourth morning, Elena walked down to the shallows with a basket under her arm. The sun was barely awake, brushing the water in silver streaks. Her knees protested with every step. The bruise on her thigh throbbed under her skirt, reminding her of hands she wished she could forget. She knelt anyway. Cold creek water bit into her fingers, sharp enough to sting her bones. She hissed quietly, then drowned another shirt beneath the current, as if she could wash her memories clean alongside the dirt. Jonah sat on a stump nearby, feet dangling, humming a tune without words. He tossed pebbles one at a time, each splash a small punctuation in the silence. Elena reached deeper into the water for a stubborn cloth. Her hand brushed something smooth, too smooth to be river drift. She curled her fingers around it and lifted. A stone, black, flat, perfectly oval, veins of pale gray running through it like lightning frozen mid-strike. Her breath caught. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she forgot the cold. She had seen this before. Her father's hands, broad, calloused, warm, pressing a stone exactly like this into her palm on an evening much like this one. His voice low and steady. This river don't forget its people, mija. It holds memory better than paper ever could. Elena blinked, and the memory slipped back into the current. Jonah hopped down and padded over. What happened? It's nothing, she whispered, though her voice trembled. Isaiah approached from the slope, boots crunching in dried grass. He'd been checking the fence line, but the moment he saw how still she held the stone, he slowed. You all right? Elena didn't answer. She ran her thumb along the stone's edge, feeling its old familiarity. It was impossible, yet the weight felt exactly right, exactly like her father had placed it there again. She stood and pointed toward the faint wooden stakes half buried in mud near the water line, old, worn, barely clinging to the earth. My father fought over land here, she said quietly. Long time ago. Men came with papers he'd never seen. They put new stakes in the ground. He tried to pull 'em up. They pushed him down. The air thickened. Even Jonah went still. Elena looked at Isaiah then. Really looked. Eyes lifted, searching, questioning. There was a man with them, she said slowly. A young man, black. Didn't talk much. Kept his hat low. Measured the ground with a long stick and wrote numbers on a sheet. She swallowed. I remember him. I remember thinking. He looked sorry. A muscle jumped in Isaiah's jaw. Those numbers, she whispered, took our home. Isaiah didn't move, didn't nod, didn't deny. The silence around him sharpened, cutting at something raw between them. He looked at the stakes, at her hands gripping the stone, at Jonah watching them both with wide, uneasy eyes. Finally, too late, too soft, Isaiah said, the rich have always had paper to win their fights. Elena closed her fist around the stone. A small, pained breath escaped her. That's not what I asked. Her legs wavered, not from fear this time, but from recognition, sharp and brutal, of pieces falling into place. She steadied herself, hiding the tremor behind a long inhale. Jonah, unaware of the depth he was stepping into, tugged at Isaiah's sleeve. You worked for Mr. Kane before, right? Ma said you measured land. Long time ago. The boy meant no harm, but his words dropped like a stone into still water. Isaiah flinched, almost imperceptibly. The truth, its shadow, its shape, hung between them while the river whispered its old, familiar song. Elena stepped back, stone clutched tight against her chest. She didn't run, not yet, but something in her face folded inward, like trust pulling its hand away before it got burned. I need to finish the washing, she said, voice thin and cold. Neither of them stopped her as she knelt. Neither of them moved as she lowered the next shirt into the water with unsteady hands. Neither of them spoke as the river swallowed another memory whole. And though the morning looked the same as every morning before, the space between Elena and Isaiah had shifted, subtle, silent, widening like a crack in old timber, just wide enough for truth to slip through. By the time the sun tilted west, the river wind carried a different scent: iron, whiskey, and a trouble that walked on two legs. Isaiah felt it before he heard it. Jonah was feeding the chickens when the horses arrived, hooves grinding against dry earth like someone sharpening a blade. Elena was folding shirts on the porch rail, her shoulders tensed first. Her breath faltered next. Then Levi Kane called out, "Afternoon, folks!" Even sober, his voice had the slur of a man who believed the world bent at his grin. Two riders flanked him, Jeb Nash and Earl Whitmer, boys raised under the Kane brand, carrying its mean streak like a tattoo carved on bone. Elena froze. Her hand slipped from the cloth, the shirt falling to the dust. Isaiah stepped outside the barn, wiping his palms on his trousers. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't have to. His presence alone filled the yard like a shadow stretching long at dusk. "What do you want, Levi?" Isaiah asked. Levi didn't answer right away. He dismounted slow, letting the air grow tight. His boots hit the ground with the lazy weight of a man who never expected consequences. He tipped his hat toward Elena. "Came to offer an apology for the other night. I was, well, not in my best condition." Elena's knees locked. Her fingers dug into her palms until the skin whitened. Isaiah stepped between them without thinking. Simple move, deadly meaning. It drew a flicker of irritation across Levi's face. "Say your piece from there," Isaiah said. Levi shrugged, half amused, half insulted. "Just wanted to clear the air. A gentleman makes amends when he's wrong." Earl laughed under his breath. Jeb spat tobacco into the dirt. Then Levi's eyes slid past Isaiah to Elena, lingering like a stain. "Course, some ladies invite misunderstanding." His smile sharpened. "Girl like that, wandering around rivers late at night. Well, folks might say she was looking for company." Elena flinched as if struck. Isaiah didn't move, but something cold ripples off him, a moral line being carved into the dirt. "Careful," he said, voice low. Levi spread his hands. "Hey now, just speaking truth of things. Whole town's buzzing. Black rancher taking in a river stray. Folks got theories." Jonah stood by the coop, small body rigid, eyes wide and scared. He'd heard slurs before, but not tied to Isaiah with danger in the same breath. Isaiah's jaw flexed. Old memories stirred. Eli's boots dragging across dirt, a rope thrown over a tree limb, a crowd of men who looked exactly like the ones on horseback in his yard. But he kept his voice calm, a deep calm that burned. "You're on my land," he said. "Leave your gossip at the fence." Levi clicked his tongue. "Oh, this ain't gossip, Isaiah. Just advice. Friendly, really. You're taking in a woman with no kin, no name worth noting, and a reputation. Well, let's say it's getting shaped real fast." Elena felt her face flush hot. Shame, anger, fear. Each clawed at her throat, but Levi wasn't done. And let me tell you something else. My pa ain't too pleased hearing you've been harboring trouble. He's thinking maybe it's time to look at those river lots again. Make sure papers are clean. Make sure no one's squatting where they don't belong. Isaiah stepped forward 1 inch, one slow, grounded inch that made Levi's hands twitch toward his belt. You so much as ride near her again, Isaiah said. You'll answer to me. Jeb bristled. Earl reached for his coat. Levi lifted a hand, stopping both. He smiled, thin as a razor. Easy, boys. I'm just talking. Sheriff Harlan'll be mighty interested in hearing how you're threatening good citizens trying to fix misunderstandings. Isaiah didn't raise his voice, didn't even blink. You don't fix misunderstandings by coming to my ranch talking filth. Silence spread. Even the hens stopped clucking. Levi slid a glance at Elena. Slow, deliberate, cruel. Sweetheart, he said, you ought to tell your guardian angel here not to make enemies he can't afford. Silas Kane don't forgive easy. Elena swallowed hard. Her ribs trembled with the effort of keeping her breath steady. Isaiah's hand curled, but he didn't draw, didn't strike, didn't step closer. That restraint cost him. Elena could see it in the vein throbbing at his temple, in the way his shoulders tightened like a man anchoring, the world with nothing but his spine. Finally, Levi mounted his horse again. Consider this a courtesy call, he said. Next time won't be so polite. The three rode off, dust rising behind them like smoke after gunfire. Elena's legs gave out. She sank onto the porch step, hands shaking. Isaiah didn't touch her, didn't crowd her. He stood a few feet away, breath steady, eyes fixed on the road Levi had taken. He said only one sentence, soft, stone-heavy. He won't have you, not while I'm alive. And though the words were meant to steady her, a colder truth curled beneath. Levi had not come to apologize. He had come to warn. The wind turned strange that morning, thin, metallic, carrying the kind of silence that rode ahead of bad news. Elena felt it before she reached the riverbank. A strip of paper, nailed crooked to the doorframe of the old shack where she once lived with her father, flapped like a wounded bird. No one lived there anymore. Only ghosts stayed. Ghosts. And memories she'd tried to bury under errands, chores, and the slow rhythm of ranch life. But she knew trouble when she saw it. Her steps slowed. Her breath thinned. Each board of the porch creaked under her weight. Familiar, yet foreign. As though the shack recognized her but refused to welcome her back. The paper was official, the kind that smelled of dust, ink, and men in clean shirts who never lifted anything heavier than a pen. She pulled it free. At first, her eyes wouldn't focus. Words blurred, lines bled. Then everything sharpened at once. Silas Kane, legal claim to River Tract 14. Supported by survey conducted under signature, I. Cole. Her lungs locked up. I. Cole. She blinked once, twice. No. Her mind must be twisting things. Isaiah was... He couldn't. The signature stared back, steady and ink black. A memory rose, uninvited. Her father standing on this same porch, arguing with a young black surveyor with a map tucked under one arm. A boy, really. Hat pulled low, shoulders tight, eyes avoiding hers. She remembered thinking he looked tired. She remembered her father's voice cracking with anger. She remembered wooden stakes hammered into sand that never asked for them. Her hand trembled so hard the paper fluttered. A crunch of hooves behind her made her turn. Isaiah sat atop his horse, reins loose in one hand, breath heaving like he'd ridden hard and fast. His eyes landed on the paper, then on her, then back on the paper. He dismounted slow, too slow, like a man walking toward a wound he knew he'd earned. "Elena," he said quietly. That tone, the one he saved for Jonah when the boy was scared, or for horses that spooked easy, cut deeper than any shout. "Why is your name on this?" she asked. No tremor in her voice. The tremor was all inside her knees. Isaiah didn't answer right away. He looked at the shack, at the river, at the sand, as if the land itself might speak for him. "I was young," he said at last. "New to the territory. I worked where I could. Surveyin' was a job I knew, Silas. He paid." "And my father?" Elena whispered. Isaiah shut his eyes for half a breath. "I didn't know the man then." "But you knew the land wasn't his." Silence. A long, raw silence that scraped her ribs from the inside. Isaiah didn't lie. He didn't soften anything. And somehow, that honesty hurt worse. "I quit soon after," he murmured. "Knew something felt wrong. But quittin' ain't the same as fixin'. And I never told me," she finished. Her fingers crushed the paper. Ink cracked along its creases. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch her. He knew better. But close enough that she could hear the roughness of his breath. "I was ashamed," he said. Simple sentence. Heavy one. "I didn't know how to tell you I'd helped mark lines that never should have been drawn." Elena swallowed a sound. Not quite a sob, but shaped like one. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the river stone she'd kept since childhood. The one she'd found days earlier behind the ranch. The one she believed still carried her father's memory. She held it out. "You remember this stone?" Isaiah nodded faintly. "You showed it to me. It's the same kind my father said belonged to our river, our land." Her hand shook. "And now your name is the reason it's not ours." Before he could speak, she balled her fist around the stone and slammed it against the porch beam. A sharp crack split the air. The stone fractured clean in two. One half rolled into dust. The other stayed in her palm, still warm from her grip. "Elena," Isaiah's voice broke. "No," she said. "Don't make it soft. Don't make it kind." He bowed his head, jaw tightening, bracing for a blow he wouldn't block even if he could. Her voice dropped to a whisper, every syllable cutting. "Was Everything you did for me. Everything. Just a way to feed your conscience? To pay back a debt I never asked you to carry? Isaiah's throat worked. No, not that. Never that. She didn't answer. Couldn't. The air between them held everything unsaid. Trust forming, trust breaking, the shape of something tender blown apart like dried leaves in river wind. She tucked both halves of the broken stone into her pocket, left the crushed paper on the porch, and walked past Isaiah without looking at him. He didn't reach for her, didn't call her name. He stood still as a carved post, watching the woman whose life he'd stepped into walk out of his reach. When Elena reached the road, she finally let herself breathe. It hurt. Breathing hurt. Behind her, Isaiah's shadow slumped. A man who'd spent years carrying guilt, now feeling it come alive again. Sharp, notched, merciless. And the river kept on moving, the way rivers do when hearts break beside them. Night fell without mercy. The kind of darkness that swallowed the last warmth off a body. Elena moved through it anyway. She stuffed her few clothes into a sack, tied it tight, and placed the small pouch of coins Isaiah had given her on the table, every cent untouched. Her hand shook as she slid it forward. The soft scrape on the wood was a goodbye louder than shouting. She did not leave a note. Words were too heavy. Her chest already carried enough weight. She stepped out of the cabin, closing the door without sound. The yard was empty. Only the lantern by the barn glowed faint and tired. No Jonah. No Isaiah. She was glad. She couldn't bear their faces right now. The road out of the ranch stretched pale under the moon. She walked it barefoot, shoes tied to her sack to keep quiet. The earth was cold, colder than usual. Maybe it was her blood cooling faster than it should. Her knee throbbed from the old bruise. Every other step flared pain up her leg, but she bit down on it. Pain wasn't new. Pain was familiar. Pain had rules she understood. Half a mile out, the river drifted alongside the trail, whispering in the dark like an old friend asking why she ran. Because staying would kill something inside me, she murmured. The wind carried her words away. She didn't hear hooves at first. She felt them, a tremor in the dirt, a prickling across her spine. She froze. Levi Kane stepped into the moonlight, reins loose in one hand, a smile lazy as poison. Well now, he drawled, I was guessing you'd run. Women like you always do. Elena gripped her sack tighter. Leave me be. Can't, he said, sliding off his horse. See? You hit me pretty damn hard, and Pa thinks I ought to settle this little misunderstanding. Her pulse hammered so loud she thought he might hear it. Levi stepped closer. Then another step. He smelled of whiskey, sweat, and victory he thought was certain. You're making quite the mess, sweetheart. His voice softened, the way a wolf softens before it bites. But there's a way out. You want Isaiah's ranch safe? You want the sheriff off your neck? You come with me quiet. No more trouble. Her mouth tasted like iron. You think I'd trade myself for his land? Levi smirked. You already almost did. Her stomach dropped. Shame rose hot, choking, vicious, but something else rose with it too. Rage. Not loud, not wild, but deep, steady, shaped like survival. Levi reached for her arm. That was his mistake. Elena moved before her fear caught up. She yanked the broken river stone from her pocket. The half she'd kept clenched for hours. Its edges sharp now, jagged from the split. She didn't think. She swung. The stone cracked against Levi's temple with a sickening thud. He staggered, eyes rolling, hand slapping at air as if trying to seize the night itself. You! He gasped. Elena didn't wait, didn't answer, didn't apologize. She ran. Her knee gave out on the slope. She tumbled down, palms scraping gravel, breath ripping from her lungs. Pain shot white through her leg, but she shoved herself up again, crawling the last few feet to the riverbed. Behind her, Levi cursed, stumbling, furious. Come back here! She didn't look back. The cold water bit at her ankles as she waded to the far bank. Her skirt soaked heavy. Mud sucked at her shoes. The bruise in her knee tore open, and she tasted her own cry. But she kept going. She climbed the embankment on shaking limbs and reached the road. Breath coming ragged and wet. Her hair stuck to her face. Blood mixed with river water down her shin. Her heart beat too fast, too high, like it was trying to break out of her throat. She had escaped him, by her own hand, her own strength. Her chest heaved, not with panic anymore, but with something sharp and clean. She could defend herself. She could survive without waiting for someone to stand between her and a monster. She didn't know where she was headed. Didn't know if Levi would follow. Didn't know if the world had one quiet corner left for her. But she knew one thing. With a clarity that steadied her steps, she would rather die on her feet than live as a bargain struck between men. She limped down the road toward the faint lanterns of Red Willow Ford. Each step hurt. Each breath scraped. Yet, for the first time in a long time, the pain belonged to her, and not to some man who thought he could own it. Behind her, Levi's curses faded into the wind. Ahead of her, the unknown waited. But Elena kept walking, not as prey, not tonight. Tonight she walked like a woman who had remembered the weight of her own hands. Isaiah rode like a man being chased by ghosts. The ranch lights fell behind him. The moon swung overhead like a pale judge. He followed the river trail, eyes searching for footprints. Anything, any sign of her. Every time the wind changed, he thought he heard her cry out. Every shadow looked like a collapsed body. Lord, he whispered, voice cracking, don't let me be too late. Not again. Half a mile downriver, he found Levi. The man was on his knees, one hand pressed to the side of his skull, blood seeping through his fingers. His horse grazed nearby, reins dragging in the grass. Isaiah's heart plummeted. If Levi was hurt, what about Elena? Where is she? Isaiah demanded. Levi spat blood. You'll find your whore somewhere down there, if she ain't drowned. Isaiah's fist tightened on his reins. He wanted to strike the man. God knew he wanted to. But a deeper terror pinned him still. A familiar terror. The kind that once hollowed him out the night Eli died. He left Levi there and followed the river. He found only churned mud, broken reeds, a smear of blood on stone. No body, no footprints going back. She had escaped. Her strength hit him like a prayer he didn't deserve. But fear didn't loosen. Fear had fangs. Fear remembered. He rode to Red Willow Ford. The town was half asleep. Lamps in a few windows. The whine of a dog in some back alley. Dust rolling low across the street like fog that had forgotten its shape. Old May's apothecary still had a lamp burning. He slid off his horse and nearly stumbled through the door. May looked up from grinding herbs, eyes widening at the sight of him. Sweat-soaked, wild-eyed, breath shaking. Isaiah Cole, she murmured. I know that look. Something's wrong. Have you seen Elena? He asked. May's mouth tightened. No, but I reckon trouble was comin' for her. Isaiah gripped the counter. His hands left marks in the dust scattered there. May, I've lost someone before. I can't. His voice broke. I can't lose another soul 'cause of this damn family. May set her mortar down. For a long moment, she studied him the way old trees study storms. Then she walked to a cupboard Isaiah had never seen her open. A small tin box lay inside, rust kissing its corners, a dent on the lid as if someone once stepped on it. May held it with both hands, reverent, as though it carried a heartbeat. This here, she said softly. I've kept too long. She opened the tin. Inside lay a folded letter, edges worn thin. Isaiah felt something twist in the base of his spine. He knew that handwriting. He'd memorized it, hated it, loved it, dreamed it. Eli's handwriting. May offered the letter. Your brother left this with me the night before they took him. Told me to give it to you if the truth ever had a chance of livin'. Isaiah's breath stuttered. His fingers hovered above the paper, afraid to touch, afraid not to. Finally, he unfolded it. The words blurred first, then cut clear. Silas paid a rifleman to shoot Miguel Marquez by the river. Silas blamed me. He said I'd stand trial clean if I kept quiet. But they never meant trial, Isaiah. Don't let them bury the truth with me. Miguel Marquez, Elena's father. Isaiah's throat closed. The world tilted. He gripped the counter just to stay upright. The letter ended with one uneven sentence. I didn't kill him. Don't hang your head with mine. Isaiah folded forward until his forehead pressed the wood. A sound clawed out of him. Low, broken, part prayer, part animal. Eli's face came back sharp and swift. Rope scraping skin, boots kicking nothing, the crowd's breath hissing like snakes, Isaiah's own tongue heavy and useless because he had not spoken. He'd watched his brother die under a lie. And now the woman he had tried to protect was the daughter of the man killed to create that lie. Old May rested a hand on his back. "That truth's been rotten under this town for years," she whispered. "But it's breathing tonight. Maybe it's time." Isaiah straightened slowly, as though rising through mud. His eyes were wet but burning. "Where is she?" he asked. "Time 800 Bamrams." May hesitated, then nodded toward the far end of town. "Cheap lodging house near the freight yard. Folks don't ask questions there." Isaiah left before she finished. He didn't mount his horse. He ran. His breath tore against his ribs. His boots hammered dirt. Every stride felt like chasing a ghost with blood on its hands. His own. He reached the boarding house, found her door, and stopped. He didn't knock. Didn't push. He rested his palm flat against the wood. "Elena," he said, voice raw enough to bleed. "I need you to hear this. All of it." And through that thin door, with the hallway smelling of old pine and loneliness, Isaiah told her everything. What Silas did, what Eli confessed, what Isaiah had failed to do, how he had stood silent while rope burned his brother's neck, how he carried that silence like a curse carved into bone. His voice cracked more than it held, but he did not hide, not a word. When he finally stopped, the hall felt colder, smaller, heavier. Still, he stayed there, hand on the door, breath shaky, heart split open, waiting for the judgment he knew he deserved. Inside the room, Elena did not speak, but she listened. And that was the first miracle of the night. Red Willow Ford did not wake gentle that morning. People gathered before the sun cleared the ridge, boots thudding on the wooden porch of the general store, whispers crawling like weeds through the crowd. A rope hung from the big beam overhead, swaying lightly in the early breeze. Not tied into a noose. Not yet. But it didn't need to be. A rope didn't threaten. People did. Sheriff Harlan stood stiff near a barrel, hat low, papers trembling in his hand. Not from wind. The sheriff had seen too many mornings like this. Mornings that tasted like rust and thunder before they broke. Silas Kane arrived with a slow, practiced stride, coat pressed, boots polished, face worn into a mask of something he called dignity. Levi stood beside him, head bandaged, eyes burning with humiliation he wanted the world to pay for. "The girl will be brought forward," Silas announced, voice oily smooth. "She struck my son with a stone, and she's laying claim to land that ain't hers." A few men muttered. A few women lowered their eyes. Everyone looked at the rope. Then they waited. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the murmurs. Isaiah rode into the square with Jonah behind him, the boy clutching his uncle's coat like a life rope. Behind them walked Elena and old May, May's old boots striking rhythm with a stubbornness that dared anyone to push her aside. Isaiah dismounted slow, not weak, measured. Soft-spoken men moved like that when the ground under them turned dangerous. He didn't look at Silas first. He looked at Elena, just enough to see whether she was steady on her feet. She was pale, but her jaw was firm, her shoulders squared despite the bruises darkening her arm. "She assaulted my boy," Silas said, loud enough for the crowd. "And your brother trespassed on land Isaiah stepped forward. "I brought something," he said quietly. The crowd quieted in a single breath. He placed Eli's letter and the worn ledger on the store porch, right beneath Sheriff Harlan's shaking hands. Harlan blinked. "What's this?" "Truth," Isaiah said. His voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. "Read it out loud, all of it." Silas stiffened. "Sheriff, you will not—" But the crowd had turned already, eyes on Harlan, waiting. The sheriff swallowed, unfolding the brittle paper. He cleared his throat, voice cracking more than once. He read about Miguel Marquez, about the rifleman Silas paid, about Eli being framed, about the promised trial that was never meant to come, about the mob. Every line made the square quieter. Every word dragged another stone off a grave the town had let stay buried too long. Levi's face went white beneath the bruises. Silas stood very still, like a man hoping stillness could make him invisible. Someone in the crowd cursed. Someone else whispered, "God help us." The rope creaked. Elena stood a few paces behind Isaiah, hands tight at her sides. The wind caught her skirt, brushing her bruised knee. She didn't hide it. She didn't look away. If fear lived in her, it lived beside something stronger. The sheriff lowered the letter. "Silas," he said, voice thin, "is this true?" Silas didn't blink. Fabrications. Lies spread by a grieving family and a black man? Isaiah finished for him. The words dropped heavy, echoed, didn't fade. For the first time in a long time, the crowd didn't look at Isaiah with suspicion. They looked at Silas. Not all, not most, but enough. Jonah slipped off the horse and stood beside Isaiah, small shoulders trembling, but chin lifted like a boy trying to show he wasn't afraid. Elena's gaze flicked to him, and something softened in her eyes despite the storm around them. Silas tried again. "Sheriff, we're wasting time. The girl struck my son. And your son chased her down the road," Old May snapped, stepping forward. Her voice, old, cracked, cut cleaner than a knife. "She hit him to save herself, and you know it." A few women nodded, shame thick in their faces. One touched her own wrist as if remembering a hand that once grabbed too hard. Isaiah didn't move closer to anyone. He stayed planted, boots spread, hands open at his sides, spine rigid as a fence post. "If you're looking to hang somebody," he said, calm as a dying fire, "you should at least know whose blood's on the land you're standing on. Time 100 mos." Harlan's jaw clenched. Sweat gathered at his temples. The sheriff looked at the rope, then at Silas, then at the letter in his shaking hands. For once he looked less afraid of the Kane family and more afraid of himself. The square held its breath, a day made of quiet and reckoning. Isaiah exhaled, slow, steady, bracing himself for whatever came next. And beside him, Elena lifted her chin, ready at last to speak for herself. The square felt tight as a noose. The sheriff held Eli's letter like it weighed more than iron. Silas Kane stood rigid, jaw locked, eyes darting through the crowd, searching for loyalty and finding only cracks. Levi shifted on his feet, bandage dirty now, hatred simmering beneath half-lidded eyes. Everyone waited for Isaiah to keep speaking, but Isaiah didn't. He stepped back one slow pace, not retreating, not yielding, just clearing the space in front of him. And Elena understood. Her breath caught. Her pulse stumbled. Her legs wanted to turn to water. But something steadier moved her forward. She brushed past Isaiah, the fabric of her sleeve whispering against his coat. Jonah reached for her instinctively, but she squeezed his fingers once, quiet reassurance, before stepping into the empty center of the square. The crowd hushed itself without meaning to. Elena stood alone under the morning sun, bruises uncovered, hair tangled from her flight, a single half of the shattered river stone clenched in her palm. Levi sneered. "Look at her. She ain't got nothing but lies." His voice hit her like thrown sand. But she didn't look at him. She looked at the people. Women who'd whispered behind her back. Ranch hands who'd spat near her feet. Men who stared at her like she belonged on a trading post wall. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely more than breath. "You all know what he did." No one answered. Silence pressed tighter. She lifted the broken stone, half gleaming, half jagged. "This was in my hand when he cornered me on the riverbank," she said. "And again last night, when he said I could keep Isaiah's ranch safe if I gave him what he wanted." A ripple moved through the crowd. Shame, disbelief, memory. Some women looked down. Some men looked angry at the wrong thing. Levi barked, "You hit me 'cause you wanted to. You came after me." Elena turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes with a steadiness born from exhaustion more than courage. "I hit you," she said, "because you reached for me like you owned me." Her voice cracked, but she held the note. Didn't flinch. "You call me river, trash, a stray, a woman drifting from man to man." She inhaled, sharp, shaky. "But tell me this." Her voice climbed, only an inch, but enough. "If I'm such a worthless thing, why is it always men like you who come looking to use me?" A few gasps, a few stiff breaths, a few faces turning away. She didn't stop. "You look at my bruises and call me trouble. You look at Isaiah and call him a threat. You look at that rope and call it justice." She stepped closer to the crowd, dust shifting beneath her bare feet. "But I've seen justice. When a woman stands alone and every eye decides she's guilty 'cause it's easier than saying a rich man's son is rotten." Eyes shifted now, not away from her, but away from him. Elena turned to the women. "And you," she whispered, "you know what his hands feel like." One woman flinched. Another's eyes filled. A third stepped forward, voice trembling free. "He cornered me by the stables last winter. Said no one would believe me if I screamed." The square cracked. Old May stepped in next, her voice sharp as a pickaxe. I've seen Silas buy judges the way he buys feed, and I've seen girls come through my shop with bruises shaped like hands. Murmurs roared, fear, anger, confusion, none of it neat, none of it controlled. Isaiah stepped forward then, not to replace her, but to stand behind her. A quiet wall of flesh and resolve. His voice was low, but every ear caught it. From this riverbank to this square, he said, she ain't a piece of land, or a debt, or a man's entertainment. She's a person. And I won't stand quiet while lies gnaw her bones like they gnawed my brother's. The words settled heavy. Even the rope above the porch seemed to sway slower, as if listening. Elena exhaled, shakily. Not relief, not victory, just release. The kind that comes when a truth long buried finally breathes. Silas stepped forward, furious. This is a mob stirred by a black man and a "Enough!" Sheriff Harlan snapped. His voice carried an edge no one had heard in years. Time were 700 malms. Silas Kane, Levi Kane, you'll stand for a proper hearing. Today, this square hears her claim, and this sheriff ain't hanging nobody on your word alone ever again. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The wind itself seemed to loosen. Elena's knees trembled, but she did not fall. Isaiah's hand hovered near her back, not touching, not claiming, just there if she needed it. She didn't lean on him. She stood on her own feet, and the town, for the first time, truly saw her. The hearing didn't end in triumph. Nothing in Red Willow Ford ever ended that clean. But truth, once spoken out loud, didn't crawl back into its grave. 3 weeks passed before the territorial office sent a mounted courier riding under a white dust cloud toward town. Folks watched him dismount at the sheriff's porch, hand over a packet of papers sealed in dark blue wax. Rumors spread fast, faster than rain on iron. Some said it meant nothing. Some said the Kanes were untouchable. Then Sheriff Harlan stepped onto the porch with a face that looked older than it had the day before. He opened the seal slow, like he feared what might rise out of it. By noon, the verdict echoed across Red Willow Ford. The riverside land, Miguel Marquez's land, was restored to his heir. Elena Marquez. Silas Kane wasn't arrested. Levi wasn't marched through town in chains. But their paper claims cracked clean down the middle, and their power no longer filled a room before they entered it. Folks stopped looking at them with certainty and started looking with doubt. Sometimes doubt was the closest thing to justice a small town could get. Isaiah heard the news from Old May. He closed his eyes, breathed once, deep and slow, like a man tasting clean water after weeks of grit. Then he saddled his horse and rode for the freight yard lodging house. Elena stood outside her door, the official papers folded in her hands. The morning light caught her hair, turning its frayed ends into something soft. Her face was unreadable, tired, proud, and a little lost. She didn't step toward him, didn't step back. "Got your land," Isaiah said quietly. Elena nodded. So they say. The wind stirred the edge of the papers. The seal shone faintly under her thumb. Land meant power. Land meant danger. Land meant a life she didn't yet know how to build. They'll come for you, Isaiah said. Silas ain't the kind to bow quiet. Elena looked up, eyes steady. I didn't think he was. Another silence stretched, not empty, but thick with all the things they hadn't mended yet. I won't run, she said. I know. And I won't live on anyone's charity. Not again. Her voice hardened, not against him, but against the world that had shaped her. I ain't offering charity, Isaiah replied. He slid off his horse and stood on level ground with her, boots sinking into the dust at her feet. Elena, he said, your land sits on the bend of the river. Mine stretches out toward the ridge. Water, pasture, shadow, slope, they fit like two halves of a gate. Could be something strong, if joined proper. Her fingers tightened around the papers. What are you asking? A partnership, Isaiah said. Yours and mine. Equal. Not one person standing above the other. Her breath caught. Soft. Almost broken. But why? She asked. Out of guilt? He shook his head once. Firm. Out of respect. Out of truth owed. And out of want for something steadier than two broken lives trying to stand alone. Too honest. Too bare. But he didn't pull the words back. Elena looked down at her hands, the scars on her knuckles, the fading bruise on her wrist, the weight of the papers declaring she belonged to a place again. You want the land joined? She asked. I want a ranch held by two names, Isaiah said. Cole on one side, Marquez on the other, side by side on the same deed. If we ever marry, that's our business. But the land should be equal whether or not God or the law says we share a bed. Her cheeks warmed, not with shame but with something quieter, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Still, she wasn't done. And Jonah? She asked. Where does he stand in your plan? Isaiah's eyes softened. Anywhere he wants. But if we build something together, I want him to know he's got a mother's hand in it. Not just an uncle's name. Only if you're willing. Not by force or pity. Elena's throat trembled. Her father's ghost flickered in the wind. His voice in the rush of the river. His steadiness in her bones. Don't let the land choose your worth, he used to say. You choose it. She straightened. If we do this, she said slowly, my name goes first on the river deeds. I choose who helps us build. I choose who steps on that soil. You do, Isaiah said. And if one day you start thinking of me as someone you rescued, someone you get to own. He held her gaze steady. I'll leave, he said quietly. Leave the land. Leave the house, leave every fence post. You keep it all. The words landed heavy, not like a threat, like a vow. Elena's eyes glistened, just once, before she blinked them dry. Jonah came running from around the corner then, clutching a rolled-up sheet of paper, face bright. I drew the new house, he shouted. One that sits on both lands so nobody's on the wrong side. Elena looked at him, looked at Isaiah, looked at the horizon where her father died and where her future waited. Then she exhaled, quiet, steady. Let's build it, she said. Isaiah didn't smile big. He just dipped his head. Respect, promise, agreement. Cole Marquez River Ranch, she murmured, testing the words. Has a fine sound, Isaiah said. Elena folded her papers, held them against her chest, and walked with them both toward the river, toward the land that had taken everything from her and now, somehow, wanted to give something back. Not mercy, not charity, not luck. A life built equal. A life chosen. 2 years passed like slow water, steady, patient, shaping the land grain by grain. Cole Marquez River Ranch stood where 2 pieces of broken past had been stitched together. A long, low house faced the bend of the river. A barn rose behind it. Walls straight, beams thick, roof patched by hands that knew hard work better than comfort. On the front step lay a single stone, a river stone split once by anger and fear, now joined with a thin line of hammered metal. Jonah had fixed it himself, tongue stuck between his teeth the whole afternoon. When he finished, he set it into the threshold like a guardian. Everyone who stepped into the house touched it without thinking. It became a habit, a ritual, a reminder of where they'd come from. One evening, the family gathered near the water. The sun had dropped low, turning the river gold in patches and dark in others. The air smelled of horses settling and cornbread cooling on the table inside. Jonah sat cross-legged with 2 younger children beside him. One a quiet girl from the Pueblo settlement, the other a gap-toothed boy from town left with no kin. They listened wide-eyed as Elena told a story they'd begged for a dozen times. The stone wasn't big, she said, holding one half of the old shard between her fingers. And I wasn't strong. But I remembered something that night. Remembered I wasn't a thing someone could claim. The children leaned closer. Isaiah sat behind her, polishing a bridle, his shoulder brushing hers now and then. He didn't interrupt. He never did during this story. And your pa? The small boy asked. Elena smiled faintly. Your pa? She nodded toward Jonah. He found the other half. Didn't let it stay broken. Jonah puffed with pride. Uncle Isaiah said things worth keepin' don't always come easy. Isaiah huffed a quiet laugh, eyes softening. Said that, did I? Elena turned her head just enough to meet his gaze. For a moment the years stripped away. The riverbank, the bruises, the crowd. The letter read aloud. All of it folded into something small enough to hold. She looked at the threshold stone catching the firelight from the house. Then she spoke, slow and certain. From this river on, she said, letting her voice carry to the children first and to Isaiah second. We belong to no man's anger, no man's greed. We belong only to God and to each other. Silence settled. Not heavy, just full. The girl leaned her head against Elena's arm. Jonah rested his chin on his knees. The little boy grinned at the horses grazing beyond the fence. Isaiah slid an arm around Elena's back, gentle as sunrise, not claiming, just steady, just present. "Sounds like a good way to live," he murmured. Elena let her head rest on his shoulder. Behind them the house glowed warm. Before them the river kept moving, slow, sure, healing the banks one ripple at a time. The stone at the threshold waited for their return, whole again, holding the shape of two lives once shattered, now choosing, every day, to stand together. And so, friends, as the sun settles over the Marquez River Ranch, we leave Elena, Isaiah, and the children in a place hard-won and deeply cherished. Their journey wasn't quick, and it surely wasn't easy, but the best stories in our lives rarely are. They grew from loss into strength, from fear into courage, and from loneliness into a kind of family that doesn't just happen. It's built one honest choice at a time. Maybe that speaks to you tonight. Maybe you've walked through shadows of your own, or maybe you've been the steady hand someone else needed. Stories like this remind us that the heart still knows how to mend. Whether we are young or in the good, seasoned years of life. Before we close, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what part of this journey touched you most. Your words mean more than you know, especially to others who come here for comfort, companionship, and a quiet place to rest. If this story warmed your heart, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment below. It helps these Western tales travel farther, reaching folks who may need a gentle reminder that hope still rides by our side. Thank you for being here, partners. Until the next trail.